my conclusion was, following European economy, British economy, Japanese economy, American economy, that the the British economy is probably going to be the first one to hit the skids. And then a reader sent me an astrological reading that came to the exact same conclusion. I've been in hedge funds for 15 years, and I know many very serious hedge fund managers who pay astrologers to tell them what's going to happen in the markets. So, there are people who take it very seriously.
Yes, there is a saying in astrology: millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. Is the euro going to go down first? Is the EU going to collapse first? Or Britain? Please let it be the EU first. Putting it all together, what I'm taking from this is that July there's going to be significant corrections with the pound and the euro, like disruptions to those monetary systems. And then in September, even worse.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history. And let's make war history. Hi everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to watch this show with Alex Krainer, who is a political and economic analyst and commentator extraordinaire, joined by Lauren from Icrypto, who's an astrologer extraordinaire. And we're going to put both of these together and see what we come up with. Alex, do you want to start saying a little bit about where people can find you? I'm sure people who come on my channel will find you often, but for new people.
People can find me on X. My handle is @NakedHedgie, and I also have 2 publications on Substack. One of them is for traders and investors called the iSystem Trend Compass, and the other one is a personal Substack where I publish a bit less frequently. The one for traders is daily, but on my personal Substack I publish more pieces related to history, geopolitics, things like that, and they are generally less frequently published, but more thoroughly researched and refined in terms of how I write it. So that's the 3 platforms where I'm most active. I have a website, I have a YouTube channel, and all that, but you can find that easily from these 3.
Yeah, and do you want to say what your trend following system service offers? What people get out of it?
Oh yes, it provides a daily directional exposure and timing signals for a total of about 200 financial and commodities markets. And so for that, I publish a set of different daily trend following newsletters that give people real-time trend following signals. So if some market is trending up, it'll tell you to buy. If something is trending down, it'll tell you to sell. Stop losses, profit taking signals, stuff like that. And it always comes with some commentary about what's going on in the world and why this might happen rather than that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alex. Lauren?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Icrypto, and on X, Crypto Consult 15. Icrypto was taken for that one. And I have a Patreon where I write up a monthly crypto market report analyzing the market and Bitcoin using astrology. And I also do personal readings, astrology readings, and I do trade readings for crypto for your own personal self, like when's a good time for myself or what's going on with my energies that gives you the best possible outcomes and scenarios. So, and that's at Icrypto as well.
Yes, fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Now the links to your material below, both of you, so people can find out. And I mean, I've had Alex on my channel many, many times, giving great insight and analysis, and I've learned loads of him. And then I've had Lauren, not enough times, not as many times as Alex, but hopefully that will change over time. And giving readings, and you've given accurate readings about what's going to happen with Bitcoin at a sort of macro level. So that's all good. And Alex, a few weeks ago, you published an article where you used astrology.
Oh, I didn't use astrology. I just a reader of my Substack sent me an astrological reading that just kind of happened to be very closely aligned with something that I had written previously. That is, I wrote a series of articles about the future of Great Britain, right?
Mm.
And so I started realizing around mid 2021 that something was very, very badly wrong. And this was on the back of the United States withdrawing from Afghanistan, because I was very surprised by how hysterical the reaction was in the UK to the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I thought, well, something's bothering them very badly. So I started paying close attention. And anyway, long story short, a few years later, we come to the point of Starmer's election and, the whole mess in Ukraine and Ukraine's default, and everything's kind of hotting up. And I thought, okay, it looks to me like of all the Western economies, the UK one was the most vulnerable one and might be the first one to collapse. It's not going to be a financial crisis like Lehman Brothers, because in the meantime, the bankers behind the smokescreen of COVID have staged a coup, so they're in charge now, which means that they will not allow a Lehman Brothers moment to happen. What they will do instead is they're going to print money to infinity to flood their systems with liquidity, so that no corporation under their control and no bank under their control goes bust. But what that's going to do, on the other hand, is it's going to slowly, maybe not slowly, but gradually, it's going to collapse their currency. So I think that Britain is the first in line for high or hyperinflation. And of course, it's going to be going along with a process of stagflation, meaning consumer price inflation, along with no economic growth, or very, very sluggish economic growth, or a recession, a degrowth. So my conclusion was, following European economy, British economy, Japanese economy, American economy, that the British economy is probably going to be the first one to hit the skids. And then a reader sent me an astrological reading that came to the exact same conclusion. So this is why I thought, interesting, maybe, since they agree with me, of course, I give them credit for being right. And
it's very gracious of you, Alex.
I know, thank you. Well, and so I thought, hey, this is interesting. I think I'll just publish it. I've been in hedge funds for 15 years, and I know many very serious hedge fund managers who pay astrologers to tell them what's going to happen in the markets. So, there are people who take it very seriously.
Yes, there is a saying in astrology: millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do.
Okay.
And also, just want to say something. I had a reading with an astrologer who appears on my channel regularly. Back in October, she knew nothing about me, and all she had was my date of birth and where I was born. And I asked her, "What do I do for a living?" She said, "You remove children from situations of trauma." She was that specific. Like, wow, not like you work with children or you work in the care sector. No, you're one of the ones that take children from situations of trauma. It's like, how did she know that? So, and then Alex, I imagine that what informs your analysis is your understanding of history, your understanding of economics, your understanding of how markets work, your understanding of, what is it?
No, not at all. It's completely packed into an algorithm. I do follow history and economics and financial flows and all of these things because, humanly, I like to understand. I also like to have something to talk about, because if I told you, oh, the price of gold just rose above the 178-day moving average, and the RSI went into the overbought level, I think that's not so exciting. So
it sounds like I should sell. if I had some, but it's not exciting.
Yeah, because that's what the algorithm does. You know, it
Right.
looks at technical signals, it analyzes the price fluctuations, and then based on, you know, historical patterns and precedents, it says, okay, it looks like this market might be trending up, and this event constitutes a buy signal. So here's a buy.
Okay.
But you know, if I wrote about why we got a buy on this or a sell on that, it, you know, it's unreadable. It's just technical nonsense, mumbo jumbo. It's not nonsense, but it would be mumbo jumbo if you translated it into English language.
Sure. Okay, so your algorithm, your trend following system is saying that the pound is going to collapse before the euro.
No, actually, we are long the pound right now. It's been
Okay.
rising. You know, it's been what, $1.26 3-4 months ago. Now it's $1.35 or so. So you know that trend has been up for past few months, but we are short the gilt,
US bonds. Okay. Got it.
British bonds,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
also
Yes,
U.S.
British bonds.
long bonds. U.S. 30-year bond we're short. We're long the 10-year note, which is weird. But if you look at their charts, you'll see that there's a bit of a divergence. One is kind of heavy, and the other one looks like it might take off. But you know, that doesn't mean that there's no prediction in that.
Mhm.
Um, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Basically, it's based on the premise that once a trend takes off in a direction, it's more likely to continue that direction than it is to reverse. You know, and so you try to spot the trend at the early stages, because you know, once you're certain, you know, the train's left the station, basically. You know, so you use the algorithm to give you the very early sign, and then you sail with the thing. But if you're wrong, then you're going to take a small loss, and then you're going to try again when you get the next signal.
Okay. All right. That's really, really good. Thank you, Alex. And then what you do is exactly what Lauren does. So Lauren
Cool.
looks at all these signals that has looks at all these movements of energetic bodies. And money is nothing more than tokenized energy, as I try and stretch my metaphor so they meet, right? So she has
That's
all these
actually very good.
she has these indicators that tells you what the trends are likely in the direction of travel. And that's the astrological algorithm that she has in her head.
Okay, very very interesting. Uh, so okay, I don't know if this is appropriate to throw out there, but I've actually, you know, you and I, Rich, have talked about crypto for a long time. You laughed at me because I said, "Oh yeah, I'll invest in Bitcoin when it gets back down to $20,000." There you go. Always makes him laugh. But I've actually made a crypto investment in the meantime. Did I tell
Oh,
you that?
you told me off camera.
Yeah, and so and the only reason why I did that is because I know the man who launched it.
Hmm.
And you know, because I don't think this about Bitcoin, but I think that probably 99% of these cryptocurrencies are frauds.
Mhm.
And because I know this person, and I've known him since the late 1980s, I know that he's not a fraud. So I thought, okay, so this thing might work. So I went in. It just launched, I think, a couple of days ago, and so this is my first investment in a cryptocurrency. So
No longer a no coiner, hey
like
Alex.
a virgin,
You're now a shit coiner.
we'll find out.
No, no,
No.
no, 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 no. You are. There's Bitcoin, and then there's shit coins.
Oh, so everything that's not Bitcoin is
It's a
shitcoin?
shit. That's right.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Well,
Even
you see,
Ethereum,
I'm a total.
according to Bitcoin maxis, which I'm not, and our friend Tom Luongo isn't, all other cryptocurrencies apart from Bitcoin are shit coins.
Okay.
Okay, well, fingers crossed. We shall watch that one, and I'll speak to you about that one afterwards. All right.
Yeah, you see, this one's going to be different, but you know, time will tell. Maybe Lauren will be able to
I'll look
divine
into it.
that future.
All right, Lauren, do you want to say, I suppose, the sort of equivalent of what Alex has said with his algorithm and what it does, and then just a broad overview of how astrology works?
Okay, so if you think about it, you know, we're all energy. You know, your energy, I'm energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, and the planets that go around our sun in our solar system are energy. They're balls of whatever they're made up of. Their energy, and that energy is all influences each other. Whether yes, it's out in space and it's not here, but for example, we just have this
Lauren, I'm going to
geomagnetic.
stop you. I'm going to stop you, right? Forgive me, because I think you may lose people straight away by just saying it's energy, right? Not necessarily Alex, but some of the viewers. And here's something I want to remind people. I want people to be aware of, right? In the West, and modern science fits inside the Cartesian paradigm after Rene Descartes, who said that basically the only thing that's worth for science to have any value, you have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to divide it and cut it into pieces.
Okay, may I stop you now?
Oh, okay.
Because you see, I'm fighting the same battle.
Yeah.
Because what I do, trend following, in the financial market is considered woo, because, and I promise you, it's in one of my books, I'm saying like, it's completely at odds with the Cartesian tradition of thinking. Except, I'll tell you this, trend followers tend to outperform huge majority, probably greater than 90%, of all those very, very smart, sophisticated Cartesian thinkers out there that are managing trillions of dollars in different funds. And all of these people have utter contempt for trend following. They think it's nonsense. And I think that empirical fact, in any given year, about 2/3 of all active money managers lose money. That is, they outperform, so they actually destroy value.
Wow.
And the 1/3 that performs in line or outperforms, that population has a significant turnover. So if you look at it over 10-year periods, about 90 or more percent of all those really smart, sophisticated Cartesian thinkers underperform their strategy benchmarks. And then you have a bunch of trend followers who have been using the same algorithms since the 1970s or 1980s, who have been consistently outperforming. So anyway, I just meant to say this, say that, all those people who are, these very clever Cambridge, Oxford, MIT, Caltech educated smart people, Wharton, Harvard, they actually kind of suck at what they do. And I think that being open-minded to alternative approaches to thinking and analysis, I would encourage it. So when Lauren started to explain what she does, I was very interested. It didn't lose me.
No, I didn't lose you because you're a smart man, Alex.
So what are you saying about your viewers?
Well, actually, Alex, some of my cousins.
Oh, you're afraid of your yeah, they're gonna pick on you next time.
Some of my cousins who, when I told them about Bitcoin in 2013, said, no, yaar, chhod do yaar, na karo, leave this, don't do this. But it is like that I was open-minded, that I bought Bitcoin in 2013, that I was open-minded, I didn't send my kids to school, because I'm interested. There's always more to discover. So I just wanted to say that. So astrology doesn't fit inside the Cartesian paradigm. It won't make sense.
No, but I think I personally would love to know, more.
Yeah, we will.
If you don't mind.
But like the Cartesian paradigm can't explain consciousness. And the astrology takes a more holistic view of the world that takes into account consciousness and energy and stuff. So I just wanted to interrupt you to say that, Lauren. I didn't know that Alex was going to interrupt me as well. No, he's interrupting me
the
again.
Cartesian system is always, we can explain any phenomenon so long as you give us one free miracle.
These interruptions are so great. Lauren, back to you.
Okay, so all right, so I guess in a simpler term, it's cycles and seasons. Everything is a cycle and a season. The markets move in cycles. There's bull markets, there's crashes, and the astrology moves in these cycles and seasons with where the planets are in the sky, how those planets influence us on Earth, whether definitely personally, but also other things, trading, because it's influencing your personal emotions, and your personal emotions will trickle out into the trading as well. But I would say mostly it's cycles and seasons that astrology is charting, and the energies of those cycles and seasons, like how, where Pluto is in the sky and how it's influencing the energy, of Earth and other planets, and how it's like conversations. All these planets are having conversations, and what are those conversations saying, and what is the effect of those conversations, and how is that influencing us here on Earth? Again, whether it's through just your emotions, but it's also the markets, money. You can take it down into what the trend is, like, is there a trend for manufacturing? Is it in a downtrend? Is it in an uptrend? With certain planets and certain places and certain signs, if you look in history, it shows that, when certain planets are in certain places, there's more of a trend for manufacturing or railroad building or shipbuilding or, wars and other things. So I guess cycles and seasons would be the best, simplest way to explain it of astrology and charting the energies of it.
Yeah, and examples just come to mind. Was it July the 15th last year when President Trump, well, he wasn't president then, was shot?
Oh, yes, yep.
I remember listening to astrologers beforehand, like Joni Petrie and a few others, I can't remember, and they were all saying that there's this star Algol is going to be in a certain position, and Algol is about leaders losing their heads. And several that I listened to were warning that there's something could happen to a major leader on this date.
Yep. And
Whoa.
yep.
Because the thing is, listening to you, Lauren, that I don't understand, and maybe you can't explain it, but for people who don't know or are new, different planets have different impacts on us. Like the
Right.
outer planets, they're way more powerful in terms of their influence on us. The inner planets, they move quicker, they have less an effect. And then when they're next to each other, I suppose, like I said in our previous video, like if you have these really powerful magnets, and if I position the magnets opposite each other, it's going to create a field inside, in between. But if there's four of these magnets at north, east, south, and west, it's going to create a particular energy field inside that will impact
Right.
whatever's
Yep.
in the middle. And if they move about, that will shape things around, and the energy quality will shape. And that where Pluto is coming to now-ish is where it was in the late 18th century when we had the revolution in the United States and the revolution in France. So there's this revolutionary energy, which I think, Alex, you and I can probably pick up and sense and talked about, that there's going to be more and more protests, more and more people saying, no, we're not having this, as the authoritarians, try and put their boots on our faces more and more. Yes.
Well, they wouldn't do that if only we would obey. You see, it's our fault.
Yeah. So everyone, yep, it's always our fault.
See what we make them do to us.
That's what we need to do. We need a planet that's going to make us obey. So, do you want to say, like, what's happening? Anything you want to say about what I'm saying, right? Oh, by the way, I got to say to anybody who's watching this, I don't know how to have this conversation with Lauren and Alex, because it's two completely different fields that I'm bringing together to make sense of it all. And so I'm flying by the seat of my pants in a way that I don't normally do in videos. So, Lauren, anything you want to say about what I've said, plus also what's happening at a much larger, mundane astrological level, the larger influences right now, and then we'll get a bit more specific.
So right now there's outer planets, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus. They're all changing or have changed
Pluto?
signs.
And
Pluto's in Aquarius. It did its change. I want to say November 2024 was its final change into Aquarius. So that's where it's staying for the next 20 something years, because it's very slow to move. Outer planets have more of an influence on societies as a whole. Not so personally, but not so much personally. Like, it's not like on an everyday level, like the inner planets, Mercury, Mars, Venus, the moon, the sun. But what's going on now with these outer planets that are changing, it's changing these deep-rooted changes in society. We can see more protests are going on. We have Saturn and Neptune, excuse me, that just moved into Aries. Aries represents the people, like the individual that I am. What are my beliefs? I'm standing up for my beliefs. No, step off, governments. You're invading my privacy. And with Saturn moving there, I feel like we're going to see more of governments trying to grasp onto control and making stricter rules, laws, regulations to try to grasp onto the people, to make them listen, to make them obey. But with this Aries energy, that self, I am, what's my place in society, we're going to have more of those uprisings and protests with people, which we can see. We can see all around that there's more protests going on all around the world. We have Jupiter that's going into Cancer this month. I believe it's June the 7th. It's going into Cancer. That's more about the domestic life, whatever country you're living in, doesn't matter. But having more of a, pride in your country also has to do with housing markets. This could be a very good thing, and let me go back to Uranus. It's moving into Gemini, and that's been known to, when it's in Gemini, to be wars. World War II was fought with Uranus and Gemini, and there was another war fought with Uranus and Gemini. I can't think of it right now, but World War II, that was like a major, it's a major war. It's a world war, and with all this energy changing, it's creating this chaos. You could feel it. You could see it in the news, that like news is coming out so quickly. Like there's this story, there's that story, there's this, that's changing. And there's all these dynamics that are changing. It's literally changing society, how we live, what we do, how the governments are interacting with us. And I do believe that when Uranus goes into Gemini, July 7th, that's when that occurs, that we will see more of an uptick in fighting in different places, more warlike headlines coming out. We have them now, but with Neptune and Saturn in Aries, I feel like it's going to be the people more that are rising up. The protests causing, revolutionary energy, because the Civil War was fought when Neptune moved into the sign of Aries. It started the next day. Neptune moved into Aries in 1861, and then the Civil War started the following day. So there's a lot going, and it's just because it's so much energy that's changing and shifting. I feel like it's like people don't know what to do with themselves. Like they just feel kind of lost at certain times. They just feel like something is happening. I don't know what's happening, but something is like coming almost. You just have this sense of change, and that's with the planets moving, the outer planets. It's just creating chaos, and chaos isn't all bad. You need chaos to make changes, and I feel that these changes are necessary to bring in better a world for people. Maybe move out some of these corrupt governments that have been ruling for however long, some of these monetary systems that are on the brink of collapsing or changing, because monetary systems change every 80, 100 years. We move from the gold to the, dollar standard. And it's just, we're in that type of large change, like now. Especially this year with these planets changing signs.
Alex, anything you want to say?
Okay, so question, Lauren. Thank you for that. You said something at the beginning that, was it Pluto or Neptune moved into Aquarius? What exactly
Pluto.
does that Pluto did?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it stays there for 20-some years, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What is the implication of that?
Okay, so Pluto is deep transformation. It's just like it takes away what is no longer working anymore, whether you wanted to or not, personal and in a large scale level. But it destroys systems and structures that have been in place that are no longer working any further. So with Pluto in Aquarius, like I'm not saying how much of a big deal it is. Like, I don't think in my words that I'm using, I'm emphasizing it, but it's like the death and destruction and rebirth. Like, things have to fall down before you can have something new come out.
Sure.
So I guess think of a phoenix. It does its thing, it burns, and then it comes back out. That's almost like a Pluto symbolism.
Sure.
And the fact that it moved into Aquarius, that That's some
that
kind
bit.
of a change.
Oh, yes, excuse me. Yes, that's has to
Change.
do with our technology. Big on technology. Um, revolution, humanitarian. Aquarius is humanitarian. It's for the people. It wants the good of all for everybody, not just the individual self. So um, it's just this energy that is coming. It was in Capricorn, and it started to crumble the governments. You can see some governments that are starting to fall down, going through this change. So now, with this distress in the governments, with Pluto and Aquarius, there's this energy of that we need to create a government and a systems, institutions, not just governments, that is better for the good of humanity, for the people, not just for, the people at the top or just the government people. It does have to do with technology. So AI, you saw a huge uptick in AI just recently with last year, and that has to do with it too. Now, there's a lot of mixed emotions about AI. It's good, but some people, there's always a good side and a bad side to energies. So with AI, you could eventually have, I forget that movie where it predicts what you're going to do before you do it. Minority Report, I believe it was.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, eventually I feel that could be a possibility, but it's just revolutionary in every sense of the word. Governments, institutions, people, fighting out for other people, trying to make the world a better place. But if you take that to the absolute, you can have government systems that's not always good. Yes, you can want it for the good of everybody, but sometimes that's not always good. Things get fuzzy in that type of energy if it's too much. So, yeah,
And,
big changes.
and there's something else I want to add, and your question is really good, Alex, because it's got me thinking. I think this is the answer. So Pluto and the other planets, as they move, what we're looking at, what astrologers look at, is their relationship to us on Earth. What's the effect that it has on us on Earth? But
Mhm.
also, when a planet moves into Aquarius, then it's looking at, well, what's the relationship where that body is located in the sky, in the heavenly sky. So it's moved from this particular constellation, Aquarius or Capricorn, into another constellation in the sky, Aquarius, and that constellation of heavenly bodies has an impact on the planet, which then has an impact on us. Is that a
That's
oh good,
great. That
I
is
just
perfect. Yep,
deduced
that
that.
is great. That is simple and perfect.
I'm doing my own free course with Lauren when I chat to Lauren.
Thank you for that, Rich.
Yeah. Okay. Now I asked you to look at the astrology for the Bank of England, the pound, the euro, and the ECB. Because I don't have I just have my mushy brain, listening to Alex and Tom and you and others, right? And like, okay, is the euro going to go down first? Is the EU going to collapse first, or Britain? Please let it be the EU first. So, do you want to start with one of them? Perhaps with the Bank of England, because that's the oldest one.
The information that I was looking at, I looked at the banks, and the transits I was looking at I was looking at that article, Alex, that you posted, that someone wrote from the AI. So I was looking at some of that information to get an idea. I do have to say one thing before I go on is that AI is very good at understanding how, it can tell you maybe how different transits might come, the outcome of things or the energies or maybe what it means. But the one thing I would say to people, if you're going to look at AI with it, always double check that that it's telling you like the right information um, about things, because sometimes AI is incorrect on things. Like it's good, but you always have to double check that. Okay, is like it stated something about eclipses in October, and I'm like, wait a minute, which year is this for? And they're gonna be in September. So you always have to just double check to make sure that the information that it's spitting out is correct. Because it can also, there's a bunch of things that I looked at some other things, and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So sometimes you have to go back in and fine tune your
Yeah.
information.
It's only as good as the data that it draws on, and it does make mistakes. ChatGPT has told me that carbon dioxide is going to destroy the planet.
Yeah. Wow. It must be true.
Yeah, it must be true, right?
But I mean, other than that, it had some really great information. So, so did you want to start with just its birth chart?
Whatever, Lauren, we're learning from you.
Because I looked at a bunch of information. Okay, there's one thing I want to go over first because I thought it was the most interesting. So I took the bank.
A lot of work into this. Thank you so much.
Oh, I have many slides here. I just kept looking and looking and looking because there's so many layers to astrology. You can like just spend hours looking at things and finding more and more information. So I looked at the UK's chart, European Central Bank, the Euro non-cash launch, the Euro cash launch, the decimal sterling.
Yeah, we chose that as the date for.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I looked at. So I took all the information I looked at from that article. Again, I looked at different transits that it stated, and then I looked at different transits that from these banks that could be an influence to a financial crash. Because at first I wasn't sure how to go about it, but that's what I'm like, okay, let's just try to, get it a little simplified. And what I did find was that these banks have common themes to them. So a common theme was 10 degrees, the sun being at a degree of 10 degrees in charts. Capricorn degree, it's a Leo degree, it representing governments and leaders, not just monarchs, but leaders and governments. So signifying that if these people used astrology to draw up these charts, it just seemed like they wanted the sun or something very important in the chart at this degree to signify governments being the leadership role, being the one in charge, the one to create the rules and tell people, how to do their thing. Air signs, Virgo and Gemini energy was present a lot in these charts. Whether it's by the degree, degree means by where the planet was, at what degree it was in the sky. And that is energy of trading, analytics, regulation, communication, service-oriented transactions. And I just thought it was very interesting that these entities had these things in common, and it stood out a lot, let's just say. Another thing that I saw was that Uranus was something that was pretty important. Uranus is a revolutionary type of energy. It changes things quickly, suddenly. It's pretty powerful. And Uranus was at very important places in each of these charts as well, meaning that it seemed like they want Uranus in a certain part of the chart to give them the power to, whether it's to change the system, like the euro, was introduced, cash, non-cash, the decimal sterling system was introduced. It was a new system that changed things.
And Uranus brings about sudden changes. So
yes, sudden changes.
Quickly.
Yeah, and I feel like that. That almost like that they needed it there in certain positions in order to be able to make these changes, to make these radical shifts within these financial systems. The UK chart as well had Uranus in the first house, changing up the governments. Again, changing the government. It's a radical thing to change a government from, certain countries and changing it into something new. It's, radical, it's powerful force. So I thought that was very interesting, and I just wanted to bring that up because I always look for patterns within the astrology because I feel like those patterns kind of emphasize, like, yes, this is something that is correct. It's not just a one-off by chance.
Well, Lauren, just on that, technical traders, and I assume Alex's algorithm looks for particular patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Within the financial indicators that it uses. I look for patterns of human relations within a household to look and see, if there's abuse going on. I know a heart surgeon would look for certain patterns.
Yeah.
Trees fit a certain pattern. We all know what a tree looks like because it fits a certain pattern. So that makes sense. While you're talking, can we look at slide 21? Because I thought that was because what you're saying is really, really useful. But for people, lay people like me and Alex, I mean, certainly me, what I'm interested in is, well, what's the outflow of it? How does that, what's the impact of all those positionings? That's
Okay.
what's key.
Okay. So for in the birth charts, the Capricorn, Leo, Virgo, and Gemini energies, it's showing that Capricorn energy is to preserve order, authority, structure, control, governments, institutions, banks. That definitely represents banks, long-term planning, rules, economic cycles, because Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn. Leo, this dominant energy in these charts is about power, legacy, status, monarchs as well, but there's not many kings and queens today. But in the UK, I mean the king of England is still around, but
Still around. But the real ruler is the city of
gold.
London.
So it's representing power. It's the leadership, them wanting to be the leader, the number one, to be the ruler, leave a legacy, a long-standing legacy. The Virgo and Gemini energy was more fine-tuned to the regulations, the technical aspect of banks and money moving around, financial entities based on rules and management, because you need some rules within banks and laws, the daily behind-the-scenes operations, communication, trading, information, transactions, because banks and money is transactions, and liquidity focused actions. So that's what that dominant energy is. It was just showing how that this energy matches what banks are, what banks are, what they do, the power that they want to hold, and the forces behind them.
Okay, so then can we look at the currencies and when collapse, when
Okay, so
hyperinflation?
I break this down a little bit more. Um, so again, I took UK transits that were happening, planets that were moving in the chart of the United Kingdom. I took those transits and I looked for different major transits that were occurring within the banks that I looked up and the Durling. I'm not saying it right. The
Yeah,
decimal system.
yeah. And what happened, for people who don't know, is that there was pounds and shillings and pence and florins and crowns, and then I think in 1971 it was a sudden decimalization, that it became working on the base number of 10, so 100 pennies to the pound instead of, I think it was 144 pennies to the pound. Just completely silly, right? So 100 pennies to the pound and so on. So that was a major change.
Okay, so what I did find was that these banks um, have a couple of very intense, important things going on around these transits around the UK. Because UK in that article again was pointed out, and Alex, you said that you felt like it was going to be the first one to come down. So the ECB, European Central Bank. Hold on, let me start in July. I don't have this in order, but so in the UK in July the 6th and the 19th, Saturn is opposite United Kingdom's Uranus. Um, Radical shifts in governments, radical changes in how they are projecting their authority, just something big, large, radical. Could, whether it's people rising up or could be maybe rules and regulations that they're trying to put on people that they don't agree with. But for the Euro cash, there was a transit occurring during this time that was signifying a loss of confidence in the euro and central bank policies. And this was Jupiter opposite to its Venus.
Okay,
Venus does represent values.
and that's coming up on July the 11th, you're saying, right?
July 11th, yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
2 days after the the suspension of the 50% tariff.
That's
Right.
right. Yes, I forgot
Ends.
about that. And Jupiter and Gemini, I'm sorry, and Uranus moves into Gemini on July the 7th. So this is all happening very, very closely together. again, it's a lot of energies, a lot of shifts occurring. Uranus, big, and it's a sudden shift, a sudden change. But anyways, so overextension reflects excess optimism clashing with tight monetary policy values. And I also wrote, if triggered by external shock or market distrust, it could lead to sharp correction or collapse. Maybe not collapse necessarily on this date, but a sharp correction in the finances, in the euro cash, or just in markets in general. And this is based again off of UK, what's happening in the UK, and also looking at what's happening with the euro cash. Now, the euro cash and the non-cash, the dates of their charts, they were everything was almost the same with those, which was pretty interesting. I mean, it happened a couple years after each other, but their suns were both at 10 degrees. And this is 2 years, or 2 or 3 years, 2001. This is 3 years afterwards. So they're not done on the same date 3 years later, but their charts were very similar. So again, whether they wanted it that way or not, I don't know, but it seemed like they wanted to emphasize something with this euro. Okay, so July 6th through 19th, again, the decimal sterling has Pluto sextile to Neptune. And Pluto next to the most bottom point of the decimal sterling system's chart. The most bottom point of the chart, it's the most private part of it. Okay, it could be hidden things, but it's the most private part. Now, sextile, not going too far into it, a sextile is looked at as something that's positive. Something good could happen from it. But with this, it could contribute to some sort of collapse or monetary issues because it's more of a dissolving of foundations of the monetary system, exposing those hidden agendas.
Okay.
Then there is the eclipses.
Oh.
Those happen in September, and those are a big deal. A lot of things, events usually you can see happen around eclipses, whether it's a couple days before, afterwards, but there's usually always event that occurs around eclipses. So this, I think, is the most important out of all of these dates and everything I have on here. Saturn is square to the euro non-cash is midhaven. Saturn, limitations, rules, regulations, midhaven, the highest point of the chart, how the world, its mark on the world, what it's doing, contributing, I guess, to society, we could say, its influence on people. And I have political leadership, monetary crisis. This could be a point of a monetary crisis around this time. And it might not be exactly on the 7th. Again, things are always in motion, so it could be beforehand, it could be afterwards. But this, I thought, was one of the most important things within all these dates that I was looking at.
Okay, so Lauren, putting it all together, what I'm taking from this is that July there's going to be significant corrections with the pound and the euro, like disruptions to those monetary systems, and then in September, even worse around the eclipses.
Right. Now, it could be something that happens that sparks something to occur with the monetary systems that gets the ball rolling. I wouldn't look at this as, on July 11th, it's going to be an absolute crash and, everything's going to be worth $0. I feel like it's going to be more events that are occurring that are like snowballing into something bigger to occur. And the eclipses are, again, they're pretty important. So that could be a time when we see the outcome of all these events building up into something bigger.
Alex, anything you want to say or ask?
No, fascinating. I'm listening, I'm reading, I'm looking, and we'll find out. But the dates, it's interesting. I think there's a good chance that, not understanding, these planetary positioning, but I see that there's a good chance of something happening at the beginning of the summer and then at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
And I think that euro and the pound are really set for a brutal correction. But again, yes, as Lauren says, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that the unraveling might be triggered at that point, and then it just goes,
Just accelerates. Because I don't know so much about the European Union policies, I imagine they're pretty shitty, but the British government's policies are really, really shitty, designed to impoverish us and destroy.
Yeah, but we still have our unity and our diversity and inclusiveness.
We still have those values. Good for you, Alex, with those values.
I'm a buyer.
Yes. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to say about this before we move on to the next thing, Lauren?
I guess one thing I did want to say is this information is not reflecting on people of the European Union, UK, and everything. This is more of the monetary systems, the banks and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Now I did ask you to have a look at Keir Starmer's transit chart.
That was extremely interesting.
Was it? Do you have time for that, Alex? Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So because he's the leader right now, his chart is very influential.